Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me today. Before we dive into today's deck, I want to take a minute to introduce myself to those who are new to this channel. My name is Wing, aka the Tarot Mechanic. I've been working with tarot for over 2 decades now and became an avid collector somewhere in the mid 2010s. I made a conscious effort starting last year to reduce my deck purchases because I just got to the point that I could no longer ignore the fact I didn't actually read with most of the decks that I owned. While I knew I had a shopping problem for quite some time, I tried to convince myself that it was okay because I learned something new with every deck. But in reality, I can't learn from them if I don't use them. And the more I owned, the less likely that any one of them will get the attention it deserves. So I actually did a bit of a purge and sold many of the decks that didn't work well for me. With the remaining decks, I decided to start this YouTube channel so that I can share them with everyone. I've been doing this for a few months now, and I'm loving this process. Preparing these reviews helped me reconnect with these decks. So, if you enjoy watching these videos half as much as I enjoy making them, then I will pat myself on the back for a job well done. And now, without further ado, let's get to the star of this show, the Visions of Life Tarot. Here is the Visions of Life Tarot by Taroko Studio. I apologize that I don't have the names of the creators for you, but as you can see, their names aren't printed on the box. This deck doesn't come with a physical guidebook, but there is a downloadable PDF on their website. Unfortunately, the creators' information aren't listed there either. The first thing I want to point out is that the box is ripped right here and right here. I roughed it up the very first time I opened it, and quite frankly, I don't think it was my fault. The natural cuts on the sides just aren't deep enough to open the flap any other way. But luckily, this doesn't bother me much. The next thing that I want to show you all is the card back. As you will see in a moment, this light bluish green color goes very well with the color palette of this deck. It's also got this diamond hatch pattern that I like, as I tend to enjoy simple card backs. What I don't love is the center circle with the letters TS in it, and I don't like it for two reasons. The first is that I don't like having the names of the publishers on the cards. I think it's tacky, and it takes away from the artistic integrity. Having that said, I have no problems when artists sign their names onto the cards, so I kind of suspect that my feeling about this isn't entirely justified. But unfortunately, that's just how I feel. The second thing I don't like about it is that this isn't even the publisher's logo. As you can see on the box here, their logo kind of looks like a caduceus, which I actually really like. So it's kind of ironic. While I don't generally like it when publishers print their names onto the cards, I wouldn't have minded it in this case if they actually just used their own logo. But thankfully, I don't care too much about card backs. I do know, however, that it is a make or break for some people, so I thought I'd bring it up. We begin with card 0 in the Major Arcana. As you can see right here, the name of this card is Start. I love this image of a mother literally throwing her adult son out of the nest. In fact, this is the card that made me fall in love with this deck. I think it's funny, albeit in a snarky kind of way, and this is the tone you'll see throughout this entire deck, using dark humor to address some of the more unpleasant aspects of life. Next, we have the Magician, which is called Ingenuity in this deck. While the name itself seems rather positive, the actual image conveys the traditionally negative aspect of this card. This man here, with his horns and the devil's tail, makes me think of the magician as a charlatan who will do whatever it takes to get his way, including cheating and lying. Card 2 in this deck is called Reflection. Frankly, I feel like I need to stretch my imagination by quite a bit to see how this particular image describes the concept of reflection. The hand coming out of the screen is presumably a man's hand, so it makes me think of online dating. I suppose it can be interpreted as a reminder to make sure you know who you are and what you want so that you don't get swept up and carried away by flattery and empty promises. Following our modern high priestess is the Empress, renamed as Fertility. Just like the card before it, I don't know how the image relates to the title of the card. Given the naked woman, snake, and apple, I understand that this is a reference to Eve and the temptation that caused the fall of man, but I can't quite figure out how this story represents fertility. And here is Emperor renamed as Authority. He sits on the throne of skulls and money. Along with card 1, you really start to get a sense of the attitude this deck has towards money and the accumulation of wealth. Next up, we have card 5, traditionally called the Hierophant and renamed here as Conformity. Personally, I think this is a really interesting image. At first glance, you think this is about the abuse of power by people with religious authority. Upon second inspection, however, you see that the puppet this religious figure is controlling has horns on his head, indicating that it is a demon. So now, my interpretation shifts, and I think this card is about controlling the demon inside us. It makes me think that conformity isn't always a bad thing. When you really think about it, civility requires a fair amount of conformity to achieve. After conformity, we have card 6, relationships. While these two people are intertwined in a very physical way, they are ultimately facing away from each other and hugging themselves. I think this can be seen from a positive or negative perspective. On the positive side, this can be a reminder that we can't lose ourselves in relationships. Even though two people come together, we must not cease to be independent thinkers. On the other hand, this can be a comment on modern day relationships where people seem to focus more on what they receive instead of what they give. Card 7 is action. I think this is one of the more humorous and lighthearted cards in the deck, and also more aligned with the traditional image. The woman being on an exercise bike demonstrates that she wants to be healthy, but her reaching for that cupcake indicates that she still desires something that's not good for her. These conflicting motivations are like the black and white sphinxes on the chariot, which symbolize our internal conflict and emphasize that willpower is needed to maintain control and stay on course. Card 8, Strength, is now Stamina. I really don't have much to say about this card except to comment on the fact that she looks really energetic and super excited about shopping. Card 9 is Searching, and it corresponds to the Hermit in traditional decks. This man is all over the place. His feet is going in one direction, his body in an opposite direction, and all the while he is looking up. While the image of the hermit holding a lantern suggests that he is in the process of self discovery, the man in this image just seems completely and hopelessly confused. Here is Destiny, with a woman in a wheelchair, and the wheels on the chair are clocks. I really like this image, particularly her expression. When I look at this card, the message that I get from it is that time and our lives are what we choose to make of it. I think her calm and peaceful demeanor is a stark contrast to most other characters in this deck. While most people would consider being in a wheelchair a disadvantage, she seems more composed, more self assured, and most importantly, more happy than those sitting on stacks of bills. Next up, we have responsibility. On the one side of the scales of justice is a man holding a briefcase. He seems relaxed and happy. On the other side of the scale is a woman trying to climb back onto the plate that is overflowing with stuff. But these stuff on the scale aren't luxury items. Rather, they are pots and pans, baby bottles, and cleaning products. I think this clearly is a statement on the creator's perspective on gender equality, or rather, the lack of it. Card 12 is Waiting. The man is tied to a tree that doesn't seem all that healthy, looking at his watch and holds an envelope in his other hand. I think the message here is that he spent so much of his life waiting, waiting for approval from the world, waiting to be invited to the right parties, and waiting to be hired by the right companies. All the while, he neglects to nurture himself. Here we have Ending. We see death snatching an hourglass away from a man who doesn't see it coming. The piggy bank that was in his hands only moments ago is falling to the ground. Money is the last thing he was holding onto when death came calling, but he can't take it with him. Card 14, which is traditionally called Temperance, is now Balance. In this image, a demon has gifted an angel with a clock. Honestly, this is another card that I don't really understand. I think the clock represents time, and time is a concern of the mortals. The angel is immortal, but perhaps he's being tempted into the mortal realm. But how does this relate to temperance or balance? I don't know. I really like this version of the devil. Bondage is represented as a contract, and I think this is super relevant to our modern lives. This reminds me of all those super long disclaimers that you have to accept before signing up for anything. the ones that no one really reads because even if you disagree with the terms, there's nothing you can do about it since those terms are non negotiable. Either you disagree and don't get the service, or you risk signing all your freedoms and rights away. Card 16, the Tower, is shown in this deck as disappointment. I actually just realized for the first time when I was prepping for this review that this card is misspelled. There is an extra S right here. I know this might bother some people, but I personally don't mind it. I do, however, find this card really hard to look at. The art style is comical, and the woman here with her legs flailing in the air is kind of humorous. And for me, this sense of lightheartedness makes this scene all the more heart-wrenching. I feel like this man's tragedy is being turned into a joke. Having that said, I don't think this is done in poor taste. I think humor is how the creator of this deck has chosen to deal with hardships, and this is the essence and strength of this deck. After the calamity experienced in disappointment, we have hope, traditionally called the star. I like how this concept is demonstrated by two people, one being lifted out of the water with a heart-shaped balloon, and the other still in the water, clinging desperately onto a rock-shaped heart. I think it really drives home the message that when your heart is heavy, you can't experience the joy and love the world has to offer. Following Hope is card 18, Delusion, known as the Moon in traditional decks. This is one of my favorite cards in this deck because I think this reiteration of the moon really drives home the concept embedded in this card. Because I love the moon and associate it with beauty and grace, when I first learned tarot, I had a really hard time understanding the negative aspects of its meaning. Here, it's renamed as Delusion, and the image is a reference to the Grimm brothers' fairy tale, The Frog Prince. But instead of the frog needing the princess's kiss, here the princess is chasing a frog, hoping to turn him into the prince of her dreams. I think this scene really aptly sums up the foolishness we display when we act based on what we want without regard to reality. Card 19, the Sun, is now called Enlightenment. I like how in this deck there is a progression from delusion to enlightenment. Delusion is a result of ignorance. The cure for this is knowledge. Here, an older and wiser man offers a youth the gift of knowledge. Hopefully, with the right attitude and work ethics, this may one day lead to wisdom. The second last card in the Major Arcana is Judgment. In this deck, it's renamed to Renewal and shows an image of a bird feeding an ear to four figures with mouths for heads. I'm not sure where the creator is going with this, but here's my interpretation of it. As this deck feels like a commentary on our modern times, I feel like the people in the nest are like the ignorant in our society. The fact that their entire heads are giant mouths is a reflection of the way so many people communicate. With social media, and to an extent, texting, we aren't having meaningful communication so much as one-way blasting of information. We talk, but we don't listen. The initial danger of this is the creation of self-importance. The long-term and more dangerous result is that of loneliness. The only way out of the loneliness epidemic that modern technology has created isn't to talk more about ourselves, but to learn to listen to others. And here we have the last card in the Major Arcana, Recognition. Traditionally, this is seen as one of the most positive cards in this deck. Here, the general critical tone of this deck is very much evident. Instead of showing the glory of achievement, we see a man wiping his mouth with one hand and holding the world in the other hand. There is a stem on the top of the world, like it's some sort of fruit. What's more, people are falling out of this fruit world. I think the idea here is that the rich treats the world like it's theirs to do whatever they wish without regard to anyone else. It's like saying the only way to succeed in the modern world is to sacrifice others. I'm not going to speak about every card in the minor arcana as I did with the majors, because I think the previous section is enough to give you a pretty good idea of what this deck looks and feels like. So instead, I'm going to take this time to share my thoughts as I flip through the rest of this deck. The first thing I want to address is why I said earlier that I don't understand the meanings of some cards if there is a guidebook. That's because the guidebook speaks about the concept of each card in general, but doesn't actually address the actual imageries on the cards. This doesn't bother me, but I thought I'd point it out because I can definitely see how that can be frustrating. Next, I want to talk about why I chose to review this deck. I think this deck is a lot more interesting than it first appears. I mentioned earlier that I bought this deck because I really like the Fool card. I thought it was funny in a sassy kind of way. It actually took a few weeks of using this deck before I truly grasped its nature. The art style and tone reminds me of comic strips from the New Yorker, which is to say that it's not as cute as it first appears. While some of them are funny, they possess a dark and satirical tone. I feel like this deck has a rather pessimistic outlook. Much of these cards feel like a criticism of the modern world. It is very anti capitalism and demonstrates a strong mistrust and resentment towards wealth. It also has a very strong modern feminist undertone. And by modern, I'm referring to a post millennial feminism, which is drastically different from the feminism of the 90s that I grew up with. I feel like the feminism of the yesteryears were more focused on opportunities, whereas current mainstream feminism is more focused on inequality. And the modern tone is the one that this deck aligns with. I've given this deck a lot of thought, and my conclusion is that this is the most negative deck that I possess. And I want to stress that I specifically and distinctively mean negative and not dark like Somnia Tarot or Tarot of the Sweet Twilight. While those decks are dark in the sense that they give off an eerie vibe, they're not pessimistic. I think this Visions of Life Tarot is the only deck I've ever seen that I would call pessimistic. Having said all this, I don't dislike this deck. It's definitely not my favorite deck in the world, but I think it's a very valuable addition to my collection. Most modern decks tend to lean on the positive side, and this deck offers a good contrast. It's very real and doesn't shy away from the hardships in life. What's more is that it doesn't offer any false comforts. When I read with this deck, I feel like it's saying to me, yup, sometimes life sucks real hard. What you gonna do about it? Instead of offering comfort and advice, it demands that I take control of the situation because it's not going to do it for me. It's not what I want to hear, but oftentimes it's what I need to hear. And that's pretty much my thoughts on this deck. What did you think? Would you like to read with it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're at it, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel for more tarot related content. Thank you very much for dropping by and have a great rest of your day.